Hi, welcome to week one of CJUS 4376 Organized Crime. This week is just a brief. This week's lecture is just a brief introduction to the concepts of organized crime and a little bit of review on theory. This is kind of a light week to get us started before we get into start getting into heavier material starting next week. In talking about organized crime, there are a wide variety of groups that are considered by the FBI to be organized crime groups. These include La Cosa Nostra, the American version of the Sicilian mob, the Russian mafia, and we'll talk later in the semester if it really is a mafia. FBI also includes Mexican drug cartels, the South American drug cartels in these organized crime groups. Includes Asian organized crime groups, organizations like the Yakuza, the Triads, and the Tong. And then some major national gangs like the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, and certain motorcycle clubs, in particular outlaw motorcycle clubs such as the Hells Angels and the Bandidos, would also be considered organized crime groups. I'm relatively amused by Dr. Ross' assertion that pirates, during their golden age between 1650 and 1730, are an early form of organized crime. But he makes an excellent point because they share several characteristics common to organized crime groups of today. In particular, if we break these down and look at them, from what Dr. Ross says, they have rules and regulations. They've got a set of rules. They're usually established rules that are established by the captain and the crew of the pirate vessel. And they include establishing the hierarchy aboard the ship. It talks about division of resources and rewards, outlines discipline. And you'll see these same things. And organized crime groups have have rules and regulations. When you get into groups like the outlaw motorcycle gangs and the national criminal street gangs, they'll actually have these things written down in almost a constitution. Whereas La Cosa Nostra and the Sicilian Mafia, these are more unwritten, spoken rules, but they do exist. Pirate ships had, as established by the rules, they had a very organized hierarchy. It began with the captain, who was in charge of the ship, but the captain's control was at the discretion of the crew, and the captains were often replaced if they were ineffective. As we look at the history of different organized crime groups, including the Sicilian Mafia, and then the La Cosa Nostra, the American version of the Sicilian mob, we'll see plenty of times where a capo or a head of a crime family is murdered and removed because the rest of the family didn't trust in his leadership or felt that they could do it better. And so these certain things also happened on pirate ships. The captain's power was always balanced by that of the quartermaster, who was the person who was responsible for distributing out the rewards and meting out resources to everyone. So while the captain ruled and was responsible for deciding where they went and where they would attack shipping lanes and what cities they would try to plunder, it was the quartermaster who actually oversaw the division of rewards, and so he was kind of a balancing act or a balancing role to the captain. Pirates were developed in response to government action, and you'll see in the development of the Sicilian mob, that actions of the government helped in its growth and development. We'll certainly see how Prohibition in the United States had played a huge role in the growth of the American mafia. Pirate ships, back in those days, they were largely operated in response to England's Navigation Acts, things that attempted to restrict colonial trade, to try to restrict colonial trade to those ships flying the British flag, which of course led to smuggling, and smuggling ultimately led to pirate groups. But then, as now, a lot of the activities of the pirate groups, just like a lot of the activities of the mafia and other organized crime groups, is about evading taxes. Cigarettes are a perfectly legal commodity in the United States, and yet the mafia makes millions and millions of dollars annually smuggling cigarettes, and they just smuggle them pre-tax. When the Volstead Act was repealed and Prohibition ended, it didn't end organized crime's role in bootlegging and the illegal sale of alcohol. It just changed from selling a product that was illegal to selling a product that is legal more cheaply because you can avoid taxes on it. Pirates, much like organized crime, another commonality between them is the use of corruption. Pirates were heavily involved in the corruption of business owners and merchants and politicians, just like organized crime groups of today. They thrive on the corruptibility of politicians and police and business owners. And then just a few other things, that pirates have in common with organized crime today is they use force or the threat of force to achieve their means when necessary, though not always necessary. Often, it's enough. It was enough for a captain to fly his flag. He might sneak up on another ship flying false colors. But when we got close enough, he would raise the Jolly Roger or whatever the flag for his particular ship was, and if he had a decent enough reputation, the ship he was pursuing would stop and allow the pirates to take what they want rather than fight. The current mafia and other organized crime groups, they rely on their reputation, their reputations for violence, their reputation for a willingness to use force, and so much so that the actual use of force becomes rare, or at least becomes a last resort. Why burn out a business that's making you money paying protection if you don't have to? If you damage a business to make a point, they can't pay you anymore. If you're a loan shark and you break a guy's kneecaps, sure, you make an example out of him to everyone else, but that guy whose kneecaps you just broke, he's not paying you back because now he can't work. And it's all fine and good to keep raising the vig on him, but if he can't pay, he can't pay. So sometimes it's the threat of force that's more effective than the use of. Almost always, actually. Pirates, like many groups today, use colors and emblems and symbols. You see that a great deal with criminal street gangs that are considered organized crime by the FBI. A lot of symbolism behind outlaw motorcycle clubs. With the Asian groups and their tattoos, even with the La Cosa Nostra with their initiation rituals, a lot of symbolism there. Pirates, much like modern organized crime, prefer to establish monopolies in their business practices. We start talking about how the mafia conducts business, you'll be impressed. And maybe even a little amazed at the extent that they go to establish a monopoly on their businesses and how they go about doing it. And so Dr. Roth makes a very good point in proposing that the pirates of old were the forerunners of organized crime today. Maybe you'll look at Johnny Depp movies a little more differently. I won't. I don't like those movies, but, what have you. All right, so what is organized crime? The real first attempt at defining organized crime was done by the Wickersham Commission, which met between 1929 and 1931. And they used, rather than using the term organized crime, they used the term racketeering, which was kind of an early term for organized crime, defined in Title 18 of the U.S. Code, at least in 1961. Racketeering was defined as any act or threat involving murder, kidnapping, gambling, arson, robbery, bribery, extortion, or dealing in narcotic or dangerous drugs, which is chargeable under state law and punishable for more than 1 year, and any of the previous acts that are related to bribery, sports bribery, counterfeiting, theft, and interstate shipping, embezzlement, extortion, credit transactions, transmission of gambling information and paraphernalia, mail wire fraud, obstruction of justice, illegal gambling businesses, interstate transportation of stolen property, or white slave trafficking. There are some terms that I'd like to cover that I don't think are in Dr. Roth's book, I like to call them organized crime-like terms that are used to label crime groups. Now, some of these terms can be synonymous, that can be used in conjunction when talking about organized crime. Some of them define a criminal group that may not be organized crime yet. The first of these terms is consortium. Consortium is an agreement among or the combination of groups to undertake an enterprise beyond the resources of any one member. So here a consortium is not necessarily an organized crime group, but several groups combining resources for a single enterprise. The next term I would want you to know is a cartel. Consortium. Even if you've seen Ocean's 11, if every one of those if all of Ocean's 11, those guys in the movie, if they all represented a group, they would be a consortium. They were a bunch of guys with unique skills that came together to pull off a robbery that was beyond any of them individually. And so there you go. Go out and watch Ocean's 11. I prefer the Frank Sinatra version. Maybe you younger kids like the George Clooney. Not important, but whatever. Let's see. Next term, cartel is a combination of producers that get together to control, monopolize, and restrict competition of the sale and price of a particular product or service. Now, this can be organized crime, such as the case of a Mexican or South American drug cartel. We're talking about an organized crime group that really specializes in one particular type of activity, and they attempt to monopolize and control that one activity. You think the Cali and the Medellin cartels out of Colombia that tried very hard to monopolize cocaine, heroin trafficking out of South America. We see Mexican drug cartels now trying to monopolize the trafficking and control of marijuana and heroin and other drugs out of Mexico today. Plenty of examples of cartels out there. The next term would be a syndicate. A syndicate is an association of individuals who wish to carry out a business transaction, usually financial in nature. Syndication minimizes the risk to any single individual. So this would be, in this context, might be several individual criminals that pull their resources for a single job, thus dividing the financial risk out among them all. The next term would be organization. This refers to two or more persons forming an association to conduct business. Individuals organize to function as a whole to become more effective and efficient. So there's the organized part of organized crime. And then finally, gang. A company of persons who act in concert for criminal purposes. In Texas, this is defined as 3 or more persons having a common identifying sign or symbol, or an identifiable leadership who continually or regularly associate in the commission of criminal activity. Okay, that's enough. That's all the terms. In reality, there are different ways to define organized crime. I'll highlight 3 of them. The first would be Cressy's bureaucratic and corporate model. Donald Cressy suggests that an organized crime group is a criminal group that provides illegal goods and services, that uses a specific code of behavior, contains a division of labor and job specialization, similar to legitimate business. Albini, on the other hand, looks at organized crime through the patron-client relationship. Suggests that organized crime consists of a network of patrons and clients that are bound together by a loose system of power relationships. A patron then being any person who is in a position of power and influence that can help others who might not be in their position, and then a client is simply the person seeking assistance. And so what Albini is essentially saying is that organized crime, rather than being this huge, highly structured, organized criminal entity, that organized crime really is just a network of these patron-client relationships. And then they call these relationships patronage, which is just simply is defined in the book as a system of intricate relationships that develop between patrons and clients. And then finally, Ianni and Ruiz-Ianni look at the mafia as a social system. And there's another group of researchers that don't see organized crime as having a tightly knit hierarchy, but adhere more towards traditional social networks or kinship ties, such as those were common in southern Italy during the days of the mafia's founding. Here the families operate as a social unit that merges both social organization and business functions. Of these 3 models, the Cressy, the Albini, and the Ianni Ruiz-Ianni ones, which one of these is accurately describes the Sicilian mob, or the American version of the Sicilian mafia? Any one of them. Probably a little bit of all 3 would be reality. There is certainly a patronage system in place and in use by the mafia. They certainly have a bureaucratic or a business-like hierarchy, and they are a social network tied by kin. It does take some kindred relationship, at least in the very beginning. Certainly involved a kindred relationship to become a part of this. For the context of this course, and I've kind of highlighted 3 of these things, and these are the textbook, and Dr. Ross' book gives you some ways to define organized crime. For the context of this class, I'd like to define organized crime by listing a set of common characteristics of organized crime groups, and then we'll use these characteristics as kind of our way to define organized crime. And so this is just a long laundry list, and we're not going to say that every group has all of these characteristics, but groups that contain most of these characteristics. So if we're looking throughout the semester, when we look at outlaw motorcycle clubs, when we look at the Bloods and the Crips, when we look at groups like that, where we're going to try to ask, look at the Russian mob, or look at organized crime in Russia or Africa. And we want to say, well, is this organized crime? I want you to be able to refer back to this list and say, okay, here are the common characteristics that Dr. Day established at the beginning of the semester. These are the things that organized crime groups have. And so you would look at these other groups, look at this list, say, okay, now, is this an organized crime group, or is this just highly organized criminals? So here's your list. First, we start with non-ideological motives. Organized crime is focused on business, not ideology. You want groups identified that are motivated by ideology. Go look at terrorist groups. We might do some of that next semester. At the very least, on campus, we'll be doing that this May during my May term terrorism course. Other characteristics: continuity over long periods of time. These are not short-lived organizations. These are true organized crime groups, have been around for a while. And really the youngest of these groups, the youngest of groups that we may look at as possible organized crime groups will be the criminal street gangs and the outlaw motorcycle clubs in the United States. Other than those, we're really talking about groups that are very, very old. Organized crime groups use both tactical and strategic techniques for long-term planning. This is something that sets them apart from terrorists. For the most part, terrorists don't really get into long-term planning. They don't think about tomorrow. They certainly have no idea what to do if they were to win. A true organized crime group, however, has a long-term goal. They plan for the big picture. Organized crime groups also are governed by rules and codes of secrecy. They seek to monopolize products and services, by which they work towards controlling prices through monopoly. And it's not about monopolizing products. And one of the things we'll look at next week when we look at the mafia in Sicily is it's not just monopolizing the sale, not just monopolizing the price of the product itself, but monopolizing its production, monopolizing where the raw materials for its production comes from. It's monopolizing the transportation. What you'll see when we look at the Sicilian mob is the mafia generally sits in the middle. Now, rather than sitting at the very top, if you think of any product, they're not the guy sitting at the top visibly controlling everything. They're the middleman. They're the folks that control not just the sale and distribution of a single product, but the mafia controls where the raw materials for it are produced. They control how the raw materials get from the farm to the production facility into the retail distributor. They control government permits for where the growers can put their farms. We talk about monopolizing products. We're talking about a system of monopolizing everything, every aspect of a business, not just the price. Not just controlling who can sell it, but they control who makes it, how it's made, and how it gets to market. That's true monopoly. Let's see, what other organized? They have an organized hierarchy. They use force and intimidation. Organized crime has restrictive membership. They tend to provide illegal goods and services demanded by the public. And that's where a lot of their power comes from, is a lot of things that they provide are stuff that people want that government won't let them have. Or government will let them have, but the government taxes it to death, and so the mafia provides it tax-free. Organized crime, continuing the list of characteristics. Organized crime obtains enormous profit through criminal means. Of course, they also obtain profit through legitimate means. So don't forget that. Organized crime employs corruption to maintain not just control of their product markets, but they use corruption to gain immunity from prosecution. A true organized crime group also creates a division of labor and job specialization within their organization, just like a real business. Organized crime engages in money laundering. I probably should turn off. Isn't that a scary close-up? Let me turn off my ESPN alerts. Keep waiting to see if they're going to make a deal for Peyton Manning. I'm going to use this video again in a couple of years from now, and someone will say, Peyton Manning. Anyway. Organized crime invests profits both in legal businesses or in legal businesses seeks to control those businesses. They display an ability to change and adapt and their ability to adapt includes their ability to adapt to changes in the supply and demand of products. They adapt to changes in law enforcement. They adapt to changes in competition. They are very fluid organizations. They are capable of change. They're not rigid at all. Let's see. We already talked about legal businesses. They use legal businesses as fronts for illegal activity. And then the final thing we'll do here is we'll say they operate internationally. In other words, they engage in transnational crime. And since I've mentioned that term, let me just define transnational crime for you as crime that occurs in more than one nation. It may be committed in one nation, but the planning occurs somewhere else. It may be committed in one nation and involves an organized crime group that operates in another nation. And so there's different ways to look at transnational crime. Be sure to look at page 7 in your textbook, and you'll see a list of a fairly comprehensive list of different types of transnational crime. But in all of this defining of organized crime, what makes the mafia or the Yakuza, the triads, the Hells Angels, groups like that different from some other group of criminals that work together? The difference is the organization. When we talk about organization, we're talking about a group of people who cooperate to accomplish objectives or goals. Any group of criminals can get together and decide, well, we're going to rob cars. We're going to be a car robbing gang. And they specialize in robbing cars, steal cars together, and sell cars together all the time. And they're not organized crime because they're not organized. And when we talk about organized crime, what I want you to look at is that a true organized crime group. And again, we're talking about La Cosa Nostra, the Yakuza, different groups like that. What makes them different is that they utilize successful business practices, the same practices used by legitimate business. So let me give you a list. How many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 things. 7 principles used by legitimate Fortune 500 companies that also are used by true organized crime groups. The first of this list is the principle of a unit of command. And this unit of command principle means that everyone has a superior to whom they are directly responsible. Obviously, that doesn't apply to the head of a family. But in an organized crime group, much like a business, everybody but the head honcho has somebody they're directly responsible to, much like a military hierarchy. The second business principle is the principle of definition. The principle of definition is the concept that everybody who has authority, their authority is clearly defined. And that everybody who has a responsibility in the business, their responsibility is clearly defined so that every member of the hierarchy, everybody in the business, whether we're talking organized crime, whether we're talking legitimate business, everybody has clearly defined authority, responsibility. So that everyone knows, this is my job, this is what I'm responsible for, this is who I'm responsible for, or this is who I'm responsible to, or both. Third business principle is the span of control. The concept of span of control implies that every supervisor only has a limited number of people that they control, they're responsible for. Obviously, that number of people increases the higher you go up on the hierarchy. But particularly at your mid-level manager rank, everyone has a very limited number of people that they are directly responsible for. And so you're not getting supervisor at this rank responsible for everybody at the rank below. They're just responsible for those people, that small group of people they're directly responsible for. Let's see. Business principle number 4 is insulation, or the need to know. This is the idea that personnel only have contact only with their immediate boss and their peers, and that information is limited to what they need to know to get their job done. You're a person in a legitimate business. You're a guy at the base entry level job. He doesn't need to know everything about the business. He just needs to know what's necessary for him to do his job. The soldier, the entry level made man in the mafia. He doesn't need to know everything that the family is doing. He just needs to know those things that his capo tells him that he needs to know for his particular responsibility. And so, if I'm a soldier, working for the Gambino crime family, and my job is to run Loan Shark, is to do loan sharking operations, in a particular area of New York. I don't have no need to know about the particulars of a loan shark's business in Buffalo. I don't have any real need to know the particulars of maybe someone in my own crew who's running prostitutes in my same geographic area. I don't need to know all the details of his business. I just need to know those things particular to my loan sharking or my shylocking operation. And so my information is limited to those things I need to know to get my job done. Likewise, if I'm a capo, which is kind of a mid-level manager position, I know those details of the business. I know just enough to run my crew. I don't need to know the details of some other capo's crew. All right, let's see. Where am I? Number 5 is pyramidal structure. This is a concept that orders flow down the hierarchy, and important decisions are made from the top and will flow down. At the same time, information flows up. And that's the way legitimate businesses do it. Decisions flow down, information flows up. Hopefully the information flows up before the decision flows down. Not always happen that way, but that's hopefully the way it should happen. Let's see. Principle 6 is the principle of specialization. That's the idea that workers are experts at a single job function. You think about a business. All the guys at the entry-level position, they are specialists in what they do. If I'm running a Fortune 500 company, my accountants are experts at being accountants. My stockbrokers are experts at being stockbrokers. My advertising execs, they're advertisers. They're not accountants. They're not stockbrokers. They're advertising executives. They do advertising. The same thing if I'm running a crime family. My guys that do shylocking, they're shylocks. My guys that run prostitution, they specialize in running prostitutes. My drug smugglers, they do drug smuggling. They may do a little weapon smuggling on the side, but they don't get into they're not necessarily experts at running a loan sharking business. They don't need to be. Specialization, when every person in an organization specializes at doing their job, everything works together effectively. You don't have a lot of jack of all trades type people. The jack of all trades is not effective. This is the guy that knows a little bit about everything, but he masters nothing, and so he's not expert at anything. And in your crime family, you don't want a guy that does a little of everything. You want all your guys to be really good at one thing, whether it's running loans, running protection rackets, running numbers, or being muscle. And then finally, you have rules. The last principle is rules. Legitimate businesses have strict rules. Everyone has to follow the rules. Well, when you're in organized crime, you've got rules. The La Cosa Nostra and the old Sicilian Mafia. They have Omerta, which is their vow of silence. Their rules that say that they don't talk to people outside the family. They never talk to the police. The old under the original code, Omerta code, you left honest cops alone. You didn't mess with them. The process of actually becoming a made man in La Cosa Nostra, part of those rules. It's part of what gives the company. Not only does it provide structure, but it creates a sense of solidarity and identity inside the organization when you have rules. So there's your business principles, your 7 business principles that also happen in organized crime. There are, moving on to a different subject, we talk about organization. There are about 5 different types of organizational structure that's common to organized crime. And I'll give you 5. I think I'm going to give you 5. Yeah, I'm going to give you 5. First, there is a rigid hierarchy. This is typically headed by a single boss, who then has the organization is divided into several cells or smaller groups that report to a single boss or a single head of a family. Second, you have a devolved hierarchy. This is a group that would use a hierarchical structure and chain of command with regional structures possessing their own internal hierarchy and degree of autonomy. And so with that, you would have a single boss or some sort of central command, and then under that central command or single boss, you would have a number of regions, and then each regional boss would have a structure under him that he would be responsible for controlling everything in that region and then report back to the central authority. There's a hierarchical conglomerate. This is an association of organized crime groups with a single governing body with various amounts of control over the whole. You see something like that with the commission, where, for instance, in the city of New York, you have 5 major La Cosa Nostra crime families, and they are all independent organized crime groups, but each one of them has a representative along with some other groups in Philadelphia and some other cities. They all send a representative to the commission, which is kind of a single governing body that mediates disputes between the different families. They're the body that actually approves murders that occur within the organized crime family. So, for instance, if you want a made man killed, or you want a prominent politician assassinated, you have to get the approval of this central body known as the commission. We'll talk about the commission next week. But that's kind of the hierarchical conglomerate. 4, you have the core criminal group. This is a group of individuals who regard themselves as working for the same organization, but this is more of a horizontal type structure rather than the vertical of big organized crime. And then finally, you have the organized criminal network. This is questionable whether this is really organized crime, but it does make the list. This is where activities of key individuals who engage in illegal activity together without a consistent power structure. You've got a bunch of people that work together to do crime together on a regular basis, but there's no real consistent power structure. You see a lot of shifting alliances in this type of hierarchy, and then members they might not even necessarily see themselves as belonging to a single group, but you might get law enforcement say, hey, they're a group, they're a conglomerate, they're a syndicate, they're something, even though they may not be. Okay, that's enough for Chapter 1 material. Chapter 2, and I don't really want to spend a lot of lecture time, uh, talking about the stuff in Chapter 2, because all what Mitch really does with Chapter 2 is review some of the leading theories of crime. And you've had those things in other classes where you've studied theory, and so I don't really feel a big need to go and explain all these theories that you learned in the courses. Those of you that had me in Flex had me for advanced criminological theory or criminology or any other course where I went into real detail about theory. You can look back in your notes there. You can review what Dr. Roth has in the textbook. What I want you to think about as you read Dr. Roth's textbook, and there's a reason I want you to think about it, because there is a question on the midterm that asks you to apply those theories to the question, why would an individual join an organized crime group? And what I saw on the midterm exam with the residential class is I saw a bunch of students give me really nice detailed give me really nice detailed answers about describing theories, and never once hit the central question of tying these theories to why a person might join organized crime. And so when you get that question on the test, there's not a specific right answer, but what the question is really looking at is, can you apply what you know about theory? Can you apply that to why someone might join an organized crime group? And you don't really even need to know that much about organized crime. You've just got to be able to apply the theory. And so some of the theories that we talk about, that Dr. Roth talks about in Chapter 2, include the classical theory, the whole deterrence theory, remember, which is the idea that people do not commit crime because they weigh the cost of being caught and punished against the potential benefits. They decide, okay, the cost outweighs the benefits, so I'm not going to commit the crime. And so the idea is that the government should make the cost of committing a crime outweigh the benefit, and so people don't commit crime. Does it work? Yeah. For normal people, yes. For criminals, people who are predisposed towards crime, deterrence has no effect. But you think about some things you might want to think about as you start mentally preparing for the midterm exam. Ask yourself, what role does free will have on the choices a criminal makes? Is it possible that there is more choice involved in becoming organized crime or joining organized crime than any other type of crime? So if you were to talk about deterrence theory, it's one of, when you're asked to talk about two theories, if you're on the midterm. So if on the midterm you're asking yourself about, you want to use deterrence theory, it's one of your two. What you want to look at, the key thing you want to look at is, okay, is there more free will involved in joining organized crime than there is getting involved in any other type of crime? It's one of the complaints about classical theory, about deterrence theory, is this idea of impulse crime. That crime that people think, well, people think about these things ahead of time, they just act. A classical theorist or a neoclassical theorist will tell you there's always a decision-making process involved. It may be quick, it may be uninformed, but it always occurs. Some people disagree. One of the things you might consider as you prepare for the midterm, and here's a way that you might prepare a midterm question ahead of time, save you some time when we get to week 4, is think about how much free will, is there more free will involved? Does it take more choice? Because really joining an organized crime group really is a choice. You choose to join. You're invited, you go through initiation. Maybe it is more of a choice. But then again, there could be some social or psychological characteristics that drive someone towards that choice. You have to decide. And that brings it up to this, Dr. Roth asks about biological theory. Now, please note, especially if you've had advanced theory, remember that biological theories are based on the assumption that criminals are somehow biologically or physically different. than non-criminals. But understand that most theorists today will tell you that biology and psychology and psychological issues only predispose an individual towards crime. They doesn't really cause crime. Um, Understand even though most of our early biological theories have been largely discredited, modern biological or biosocial theories do exist. There are some that involve the study of kinship pairs, the study of brain structure. So if you want to talk about the possibility that someone might join an organized crime group because of some predisposition, you have to ask yourself, how much impact do you think biology would have on this decision to join an organized crime group? And it's kind of the same thing you would ask yourself about deterrence. Does it have less of an effect or more of an effect on OC? Think about as we study some of the Sicilian mafia and the American mafia, the La Cosa Nostra, over the next couple of weeks. We might ask yourself how these groups would look at someone biologically predisposed towards crime. If you're a capo, if you're the head of a family, do you really want someone in your group who has a biological issue, maybe has less control over his behavior? You might look at Sheldon Summa types. You might consider that organized crime groups utilize a division of labor and job specialization. And so you might ask yourself, this might be a good way to go on your midterm. You might ask yourself, could Sheldon Summa types have some relationship to job specialization in organized crime? It's possible. You might look at antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. Look at some of the characteristics of APD and psychopathy. And ask yourself this: if you were in a leadership, if you were a capo, if you were a head of a family, if you ran a crew, would you want someone with antisocial personality disorder or someone suffering from psychopathy in your crew? Might be a good avenue to approach to talk about a relationship between theory, or an attempt to apply theory to the concepts of organized crime. You might look at social disorganization theory. And there you're asking yourself, what role do you think environmental or social influences have or play on the decision to join organized crime? And that'll probably be one of the more popular sets of theories to use on the midterm. Especially and you'll see this a lot, and think about as we study the Sicilian mob and the formation of it in Sicily and Italy. Think about how the political, the economic, and the social environments influenced the growth and development of the mob, which, by the way, is another question, a whole different question on the midterm. So there's something else that you might take notes about or pay special attention to when you read the book or listen to lectures. Make note to yourself of political, social, and economic conditions in Sicily that led to the growth and development. And don't limit yourself to one time frame. Look at that over time when you go to answer that question on the midterm. Look at political, economic conditions in the United States with the growth and development of La Cosa Nostra. Let's see. Dr. Roth talks about differential opportunity. Certainly an excellent theory to talk about when discussing the influence of these theoretical concepts on the decision to join organized crime, because not everyone has the same opportunity to be in an organized crime group. When I was a kid, you watch gangster movies as a kid. For me as a kid, gangster movies were movies about the mob. And you as a kid, you fantasize, man, it'd be cool to be a be a mafioso. And then you look at the reality. If you're not of Sicilian descent, in the old day, you didn't join. Disheartening for me as a child because I am of Sicilian descent. Unfortunately, it's on my mother's side, and the old country rules were you had to be descended, had to the descent, the blood had to be on your father's side, and so I would be ineligible for to be a made man. Out of the old country, one of the old families of Sicily. The American mafia today, if I had a particular skill, they probably wouldn't care that my Sicilian blood runs through my mother's side. And then finally, and one of my favorite ones to look at is labeling theory. This theory that our behavior is based upon our perception, our belief in how others perceive us. Think about, labeling theory is a very micro theory. It's very much about attempting to explain why individuals engage in crime. But could you apply the labeling theory concept at the macro level for ethnic-based organized crime? Think about the effect it has, the perception that all Sicilians are mobsters. Could that perception, that label, I'm a Sicilian man, therefore I must be a mafioso, or there's a good chance I'm mafioso because I'm Sicilian. Well, could that label affect my decision to join? That idea, subconsciously connecting that label. Oh, I'm Sicilian. Well, Sicilian equals mafioso, so I might as well become one, or at the very least, act like one. Things to think about. Like I said, I'm not going to go into great detail explaining these theories. I could be here, and you could be there listening to me for hours if I was to explain all those theories. And that is certainly more appropriate for a criminology course than this. This is an advanced course, and so by now you should have had some foundation in theory, and then there are plenty of resources available for you to get that foundation in theory if you feel like you need it. If you're having trouble with it, contact me and I will put you on to some resources. If you contact me, ask me specific questions about theory that you might have, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. You can always put them in the questions about lecture discussion forum. Okay, that's it for this week. This may be the only week you get one short video. Might have more. Probably be videos maybe be a little longer next week and the week after. Okay, well, that is it. I will see you later.